Hi everyone, this is Sergeant Kerridge, and today I'm going to talk to you about section formations. So we're going to introduce a few of the basic section formations. So the objective is, by the end of this presentation, hopefully you will understand why we use section formations. You'll recognise four basic formations, and you'll appreciate the advantages and disadvantages of each of the different formations. So, first of all, let's have a quick recap on rifle sections, which we looked at previously, and we'll also introduce a couple of new terms as well. So this image should be familiar from the previous lesson on rifle sections. Section usually consists of 8 members, but this number may vary. I must stress it's not always 8 in number. 8 is just the usual number. So before a patrol begins, it's good practice to number off each section member to make it clear where each member should be and who will be leading off, etc. We've got various roles within the section, such as section commander, 2IC, and so on. Sometimes the role of point man is also referred to as scout. A cadet section will almost certainly not have any gunners, unfortunately, but we will mention this in the lesson for completeness. We'll mention gunners in the formations because it's important to understand it. And this whole structure of a section is known as the order of march. Remember that we split the section into 2 fire teams. Charlie is led by the section commander, and Delta is led by the 2IC. So you see Charlie here, the first 4 members of the section, Delta, the last 4. Okay, sometimes when we're discussing things like section formations and later on tactics, it's easier if we use symbols for them. So you'll notice that with the numbers I've got below the men in this section, I've used colour green for Charlie and blue for Delta. And the symbols I use are circles with green background for Charlie, blue for Delta, and P for point man. IC for the section commander because he's in charge or in command. 2IC for, surprisingly enough, the 2IC, second in charge. G for the gunners, and the circles without a letter are the riflemen. And on the diagrams I do here, I'll also try to use the numbers with the symbols to make it clear which section member they represent. So why use section formations? Well, we use section formations when we patrol because we need to consider certain factors about that patrol. And the first is the type of ground we're going to be patrolling over. Is it woodland? Is it an urban environment? Is it an open environment? I'll be crossing an open field, for example, or is it hilly? That also goes on to considering cover and concealment. It affects not only using cover and concealment for ourselves, but if we're likely to come across the enemy, how's that going to affect our ability to observe the enemy? Obviously, we'd like to see the enemy first. Where do we expect the enemy to be? What directions are we likely to encounter the enemy for? Do we have a clear idea of where they are? Are they going to be forward of us? Could they attack from, you know, all around us? Could they come to us from the left, the right, behind us, wherever? So it's something we need to consider. What's the light and the visibility like? You know, are we doing this in the daytime? Is it night time? You know, how easy is it to see, or how difficult is it to see? Those are all going to affect our choice of formation that we use. And also, we need to consider how easy it is to control the section. You know, the section commander and the 2IC need to be aware of how difficult or how easy it's going to be to pass information along the section, to signal to people, to communicate things. You know, if the point man spots the enemy, he needs to relay that information not only to the section commander but down the whole section. So that's another factor that we need to consider. So the choice of section formation we use is based on these various factors: the type of ground, what cover and concealment is like, where we expect the enemy to be, our visibility, or the visibility of that area, whether we're visible, and how easy it's going to be to spot the enemy and to control the section. Be aware though that during the course of a patrol, you know, circumstances change, so it's very likely that the formation will need to change at different stages depending upon those circumstances. You know, we may start with one formation and encounter something, whether it's a change in the ground, whether it's seeing the enemy, whether we start off and it's quite light and it becomes dark. We may need to change the formation, so do not believe that the formation you start with is necessarily the one you're going to remain with. Right, before we discuss the individual formations, I must stress that diagrams and images used in this presentation are obviously not to scale. The members in this section are far too close to each other. Remember what we were taught in the camouflage concealment lesson: spacing is important. Furthermore, if the section is close to each other, it becomes a more vulnerable target. So keep a distance of between 5 to 7 metres between each member and vary the spacing. Don't keep the same distance between all the members of the section. Remember what we said in camouflage and concealment: the eye is drawn to regularly spaced items. So by varying that distance, you make yourself less likely to be spotted. But one good thing is, in this diagram at least, the rear man number 8 is keeping an eye behind the section, something many cadets forget to do. So this first formation you're looking at is single file. See from the arrow the direction of travel. This particular formation, single file, is good for narrow areas such as small tracks, or when you're going through woodland, or when you're following through, you're following a hedge along. So this table and the numbers give you an idea of the order of march, where people's position are. So obviously the point man number 1 and the rear man tail end Charlie number 8. And I'll try to follow this convention throughout. So we're looking at single file again, but this time from a bird's eye view. You can note the direction of travel, and as with the previous diagram, they're not to scale. You obviously wouldn't have each person as close up as this. Do note though, this makes it a little bit clearer that each member moves over a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right in order to give themselves the ability to see forward. You don't want to just be looking at your oppo's back. It raises another point. Section members are on patrol, so they need to be constantly looking all around. You don't just look to your front, you look all around you as you're moving, and in further lessons we'll be looking at patrolling and talking about arcs of fire and such. So don't just walk in a straight line looking ahead all the time. You need to be aware of your surroundings and possible dangers. So what's the advantages of single file? It's useful for moving along linear features, straight lines, roads, thin, long areas, basically. That's what we mean by linear features. It's the least vulnerable of the formations to attacks from the left or right flanks. Because if you think about it, if you were attacked from the left, everyone in that section could turn to the left and bring fire to bear on the enemy. The same for if you were attacked from the right. It's something to consider. If you think you may be attacked from the left or the right, single file could be the correct formation to use. Finally, think about visibility and control. It's good for control at night. It's easy to keep track of where people are with single file, and for the section commander and 2IC to control things. So, disadvantages. It's vulnerable if you contact the enemy from your front or your rear. Think about it, you've only got one person at the front or the rear able to respond initially. So if you think you're going to come across the enemy from the front or the rear, it's not the best formation to use. And it's slow passing the information from the front to the rear, where there's this long straight line. Let's imagine the point man spots something and he wants to pass that signal down. Yes, he can pass it to the IC, but he's then got to pass it to number 3, the gunner, then pass it to number 4, and so on and so on. It's got to work its way all the way down that line quite slowly. So the next formation we're going to look at, this one is known as file. It used to be called staggered file. Some people may still refer to it that, but the proper term we should be using is file. Do not get it confused with the previous formation we talked about, single file. That's why I make it very clear. When you're using single file, you must say single file. If you're using this formation, use the term file. Basically, the section splits into left and right files. These lines of 4 are known as files. So one side of file is slightly further forward than the other. So if I put the numbers up, you can see number 1, he's slightly further forward than number 3 on the other side. That's why the old name used to be staggered file. File is used for wider tracks and when you're moving through woodland. Now, those splits we talked about where we split into 2 files, there's 2 ways that this could be done. If you look on this diagram, you can see that at the front, the split is that the Charlie fire team is all at the front. So they've split left and right. If you think of the point man and the IC being on the left hand side, because we're travelling as we look here from left to right. But all of Charlie is at the front and Delta is at the back. But this is where things get a little bit more complicated. You'll notice that if you look at numbers 6 and 7, they've kind of swapped their position around. And the reason for that is we need to have our gunners, if we have gunners, available to put fire out in different directions. So in this version of the file formation, number 7 has moved over to the left, so he can cover if you are contacted from the rear or from the left. And you'll see that number 3, Charlie's gunner, is at the front and to the right, so he can cover contacts from the front or to the right. So this is a common feature that happens with the formations, that the gunners sometimes have to move, if you like, out of order. So with this split, the team is moving front and rear. It's important that before you set off on a patrol, it's decided and communicated within the section what kind of split you're going to do. So if this is the version of the split you're going to do with a front and rear split, everyone needs to know this, because it may be too late when you're out on the ground to do that. You need to know beforehand. And then we have this other version, and that is where the teams split left and right. So whereas before you had all of Charlie at the front and all of Delta at the back, at the rear, in this case the teams have split left and right. So Charlie have moved over to the left hand side and all of Delta have moved over to the right. Again, it needs to be clear beforehand which of these versions you're going to do. And once again, the gunners have moved kind of out of order. So as you can see here, instead of on the left hand side Charlie going 1, 2, 3, 4, the gunner, which is normally number 3, has moved to the rear, and the rifleman that would have been at the back of Charlie has moved forward 1. That's position 4. And a similar thing has happened with Delta. If you look at the blue symbols here, you'll see that number 7, who would normally be behind the 2IC, has swapped positions with the 2IC. 2IC has moved back 1, position 6, and the gunner has come forward 1 to position 7. And that's so, again, that the gunners can cover each side. So Charlie, number 3, is going to be able to cover the rear and out to the left. The gunner of Delta, number 7, although he's not right to the front, he's able to cover out to the right, and obviously he's close to the front should there be a contact from the front. So that's an important point with the file formation. There's 2 versions. The teams either split in left and right, as in this case, or the teams split in front and rear. So advantages of the file formation. Good observation, both left and right. So you've obviously got 4 people on either side. You can look out to the left and right, and because of that staggered nature, they can also look to the other side. So if you think about it here, think about, say, position number 2, the IC. Yes, he can clearly look out to the left, which is obviously up in our diagram here. But because of the gap between positions 3 and 4, that staggered part, he's able to look between them, so he can also look to his right. That's the reason they are staggered that way. If they were directly in line with each other, it would mean they would be limited in their ability to observe both sides. So, good observation both left and right. Able to defend from the left and right flanks. If you think about it, as I said before, with the staggered gap between each side, it means that not only can you turn to your own side, so looking at this diagram, the point man can fire obviously to the front, he can fire to his left, but he can turn to his right, and because that gunner is staggered back slightly, the point man could also fire to his right. In the same way as the gunner at position 3, not only can he fire directly forward and to his right, he can also turn to his left and he could fire in that gap between positions 1 and 2. So ability to defend both left and right flanks and good observation on both. Disadvantages of the file formation. It's poor to respond to front or rear attacks. Again, a bit like with the single file, you're limited in who's at the front and who's at the back. Now, it's good to respond to left and right attacks, but poor to respond to the front and back. You know, if you were contacted from the front or rear here, initially only 2 members of the section would be able to respond. It's also difficult to maintain that formation in poor light or at night. It's very easy for that formation to start to drift apart because it's difficult to see each other. It's something to consider. That's where the single file was a better formation at night. It's much easier to maintain. Each member's only got to really look to their front or to their rear. So, this third formation, this one's known as extended line. It's good for open country, and particularly when you're approaching a known enemy position. You go into the extended line and approach it, and you're bringing all your firepower, the whole firepower of the section, to bear upon it. And also, not only to the front, but you can turn. Obviously, every member of the section can spin around 180 degrees and face the rear, so they can project the firepower to the rear very quickly as well. Basically, to produce extended line, all the members of the section fan out from the middle in a straightish line. Not quite straight, a bit like we talked about with fire, where you can be slightly forward, slightly back, but roughly it's a straight line, so you're all facing in the same direction of travel. But look at the numbering here. Again, the 2 gunners, positions number 3 and 7, they shift out. That's why from the middle we go 1, 2, and then 4 and 3. The gunner, number 3, has moved out to the end. And also with Delta, following those blue numbers, 5, 6, but then 8 and 7. 7 is the gunner from Delta, and he's moved to the end. So you're bringing the 2 gunners out to the very end. That means they can project firepower out, not only to the front and rear as everyone else can do, but the gunners can turn sideways and they will be able to fire out on their own flanks. So in this case, number 3, Charlie's gunner could turn to the left and fire out to the left, and number 7, Delta's gunner, could fire out to the right. We look at the extended line formation from above using these symbols, the bird's eye view. You can see more clearly how the 2 fire teams flow out from the middle. So in the way it's shown in this diagram, you've got Charlie flowing out upwards, and Delta fire team flowing downwards. And again, clearly you can see the 2 gunners have swapped their positions to be on the ends of this extended line formation. It's just making it clear how the gunners have swapped around with the rifleman that's normally next to them. So, advantages of extended line. As we've said, we can put maximum firepower towards the enemy position. We're able to defend both from front or rear attacks from the enemy. Now let's look at the disadvantages of the extended line formation. It's hard to maintain a good formation. You'd be quite surprised that when everyone is lined up in that so-called straight line and start moving, we all kind of move a bit different speeds, and we're carrying different weights and things. It's not too difficult for people to start becoming out of line, so it's quite difficult to maintain that formation, particularly when people are concentrating ahead or so. They're not necessarily looking to their left or right and seeing if they're still level with the other members. So it's one of the disadvantages of extended line. It's difficult to respond to attacks from the left or right flanks. It's one of the reasons why the gunners move out to the two extremes. Yes, it's good that they're there and they can respond, and obviously the gunners can produce a higher volume of fire than riflemen. But with this formation, initially you're going to only have one person on each of those directions. So if you're expecting the possibility of an attack from the left or right flank, extended line would not be a good formation to use at that point. So we've covered 3 formations. Let's look at the last one. And the last one is called Arrowhead. It's similar to the extended line, but basically what's happened is, as you move away from the middle, each member of the section moves back slightly. They're kind of angled back. In this diagram, it's not the sharpest of arrowheads. It can vary, but you'll learn about that later. But basically, as each person moves out, like in an extended line, they also move backwards slightly. So as you can see, the point man really does become the point of an arrow in this formation. And as with the extended line, the 2 gunners have moved to the extreme ends again, as you can tell by the numbering in the diagram. So with Arrowhead, you're able to bring firepower forwards, rearwards, obviously if everyone spins round, and to the flanks, because to the flanks, to the left and the right, because where you've got this angle of the 2 fire teams, they're able to turn and fire out to their flanks. So in this case, if as the section was moving forward, they were attacked from their left, that would be Charlie, the green side on here. The members of Charlie can turn to their left and respond to that attack. Delta would obviously have to move round, and if you were attacked in this formation from the right, Delta could initially turn to their right, respond immediately, and then Delta would have to move to join them. Looking at it from the bird's eye view again, using the symbols, as you can see, point man is the point of this arrowhead, and you have Charlie going angled backwards, moving off to the left, and Delta going off to the right from that point man. The point man there acts as the kind of link between the 2 fire teams in this kind of formation. And again, you can see the gunners are at the very ends of those lines as they move off. So, advantages of Arrowhead. Maximum firepower towards a known enemy position. Think about it, we've got everyone sort of, although they're angled off there, they're facing forward and they're all able to fire to the front. Everyone is able to turn around and defend from the rear as well as from a front attack. So, Arrowhead disadvantages. It's hard to maintain a good formation. Think about it a bit like with extended line. We all walk at different rates, and we could be lugging different equipment and stuff. To keep that exact shape or formation is quite difficult. It's difficult to respond to attacks from the left or right flanks. If you think about it, if you were attacked from the left, in this diagram that would obviously be from the top, Charlie could respond there at the correct side, but they're also in the way for Delta to join them in responding to a left attack. So you'd find that Delta, the blue symbols, would have to move around very quickly to the side to be able to join Charlie in responding to that attack. And conversely, if they were attacked from the right, Delta would be able to respond. Charlie would not be in a position to do so. They'd have to move before they would be able to safely respond. So let's summarise. We've looked at 4 basic formations. That is single file, file, used to be known as staggered file, extended line, and arrowhead. There are some other formations, some that are not used anymore that we're not going to talk about, so we'll just stick to those 4 basic ones: single file, file, extended line, and arrowhead. Remember, the order of march is important. This is why we do the numbering off at the beginning. Makes it clear where we're supposed to be in the order of march. And as long as we understand our formations and we've gone through standard operating procedures beforehand, we know where we're supposed to go when a formation change takes place. We need to consider bringing the maximum firepower against the enemy. This is one of the reasons why we have formations and why we have different choices of formations. So we need to think about a formation in terms of bringing the firepower against the enemy. That ties in with this point. We need to consider the likely contact directions. Where are we going to contact the enemy from? Do we know that it's only going to be from the front? Could it be from the left or the right flanks? Could we possibly even be attacked from the rear? So we're going to make the choice, our decision about the choice of formation, taking all of these points into account. Spacing and movement are important. They were important from the point of view of camouflage and concealment. We know all about regular spaced items are easily spotted by the eye, and fast movement is spotted by the eye. But we also need to consider that spacing is important in terms of making us a vulnerable target. If we're all bunched up too close to each other, it's very easy for the enemy to take out and cause a lot of casualties very quickly. It's much better to have that spacing. So recommended spacing between about 5-7 metres, and vary it. Don't have it too regular. And there's various advantages and disadvantages for all of the formations, which is why we have to choose different ones for different circumstances. And as circumstances change during a patrol, formations change. It's going to be different times. It can be that we encounter the enemy or we spot the enemy first, so we move into a different formation to engage them. Or we come across ground that causes us to have to change the formation we're using. Gunners move to their best position. If we do have gunners, bearing in mind that cadet sections don't normally have them, but if we do have gunners, most of the formations will require them to move into a different position. So although we've done that order of march and numbered people off, sometimes people have to move their position a bit. And again, this is something that's important. We have to practice beforehand. Which leads me on to the final point. Practice makes perfect. All these things need to be rehearsed. It looks very simple when you see these diagrams. It's another matter to go out as a section and actually perform them and know where you're supposed to be in your place in the section, in your, where you are in the order of march, and knowing the movement. And I must remind you, always get it clear beforehand what kind of split you're going to do. If you're going to do the file, are you going to do it so that the fire team split front and rear? So say Charlie going to the front, all of Delta going to the rear. Or are you going to do the left and right split, where the left file is all Charlie fire team and the right file is all Delta fire team? You need to get that clear beforehand, find out what the standard operating procedure is going to be for your section so everyone knows. Okay, so in future lessons we're going to have a look at field hand signals. That kind of flows on from formations, because many of the hand signals are actually to communicate which section formation to move into. So it kind of makes sense to know what formations are before you learn the field signals. And also we'll have a look at other areas of patrolling as well. I hope that was useful. I hope that made sense. If there's any queries or comments or questions about any of this lesson, please get in touch with me and I'll try to answer them for you. Thank you very much.